So hello. We have someone here. Want to have this chat with one of our customers, Platnova, and I'm speaking with is it CTO, right? Co-founder and
Yeah,
CTO.
yeah.
Joshua, so maybe tell us a bit about yourself, could you?
Yeah, sure. So, I'm a co-founder and the CTO at Platnova. About myself, so I'm a software engineer. I've been building products across Africa, the Middle East, and right now Europe. So at Platnova, what I do at Platnova personally is to build the product integrations, ensure that literally everything is working. So that's more of like my role at Platnova. But then personally, I think I've been building products for around 8 to 10 years now. So building products, commercializing products, scaling those products. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about me.
Ah, so you're the one that when everything is on fire, everybody runs. So how did you come across API Toolkit? And can you share?
So I think I came across it from one of your posts on Twitter. So you tweeted like you did a demo of it, and I think one of the things about it was at that point in time we are trying to build something similar to it in house. So we've been using Google Cloud Logs, we've been using quite data a couple of login tools, but then it wasn't really like let's say fine tuned or sort of like customized to our needs. Then we started looking at building it in house. But then I think one of the things when we were designing the system before we started building, one of the things that was more of like our blockers was managing the data. Because I think the thing with login is that a lot of data are flowing in. So how to manage them, how to make it scalable, how to sort of like it's expensive. Managing data is expensive. That's one of the things. But then when I came across API Toolkit, it resonated to the problems. So I saw it's like
Mm.
is actually what we've been looking for. Maybe I should take a look at it. So I signed up, but we didn't integrate yet. So I was just trying to play around with it. So running it on local environments, like testing things, because like it was
Mm.
just adding a package. But then I didn't sort of like take it live yet. I was playing around with it. Then I think one of the well, let's say push that we got was another video you did, and then we had an issue that I was like, this would have actually solved it for us if we had this already. So I think that was sort of like the push where we started stuff like, okay, let's get this over the line. Let's integrate API Toolkit.
I would like to hear about that issue, but before I ask about that issue, maybe let's backpedal a little bit. Like, could you tell us about Platnova? Like, tell us, like what
Please.
you do and why it's important that things don't go wrong.
Okay, I think one of the key things is so to just explain is we're trying to build the Revolut for Africa in the sense that we are not just trying to build a cross-border settlement payment or a finance app, but then we're trying to sort of like build a finance app, but then add some lifestyle to it, make it sort of like customize it to each individual, each customer that signs up to Black. We're trying to build it based on your lifestyle. For instance, the way Anthony uses Platnova could be different the way Joshua uses it. So we're trying to sort of like
Mm.
get that sweet spot for each of our individuals. Definitely, we have a couple of features like you can be able to create cards, you can be able to virtual cards per se, and we have one of our interesting features where the virtual cards you can connect it to Apple Pay, Google Pay. Like I don't think any products or any fintech right now does that in Africa. So then you can also do things like send money, pay tuition fees abroad. You'll be able to even go down to being able to bill payments, being able to access quite a range of gift cards. And I think one of the interesting things about our bill payment product is it's not just based on, let's say, for instance, Nigeria or Africa. It's stuff like global. You can, for instance, be in Nigeria and be able to pay for your, let's say, UK line, be able to pay for your US line. You can be able to
Mm.
subscribe it, you can be able to pay for your internet anywhere in the world. So we're trying to sort of like build a global product that is customized to the lifestyle of each and every individual. Each individual has something unique to them about BlackBuck.
Interesting. So it's financial services as well as yeah, financial services and bills, different kinds of
Yeah.
bills
But then
across.
yes, I think one of the key things you're not just making the financial side, you're making a lifestyle product. More of like
Uh,
uh adds a lifestyle so let's say process to your finance. So your finance transaction, there should be a lifestyle around it. The way you make your payments, the way you buy things online, it should sort of like resonate to your lifestyle.
Uh, okay, okay. But
Hello,
you
can you
do
hear me?
this. You are a B2C product. Yeah, I can hear you. So you're a B2C
Okay.
product, right?
Yeah, right now we're a big product, though we have Platnova Business, which we are looking at launching within the first quarter of this year, which has a lot. So we're trying to like what we built, we are trying to commercialize it. So other fintech products can have access to our APIs, being able to sort of like adding those core aspects or that distinguishes Platnova into their product. So we are looking at first quarter of this year, before the end of this first quarter of the year, to launch a better version of Platnova,
Oh, interesting.
of Platnova
Okay,
Business per se.
so you're a B2B and a B2C business that you're basically dealing with people's money and people's bills, which can ruin their lives if something goes wrong in between. So can you tell
Yeah.
me, maybe let's start with that specific example you gave before that made you decide to become an API Toolkit customer? Like, what happened? Can you tell me?
It's I think it was sort of like the conventional, the old provider issue. We are definitely running a payment system, running stuff like a finance product. You don't just get to build everything. You sort of you can like in most cases plug into other providers who already have a service or who already have a feature you're trying to add into your product. So I think it was a classic provider issue where one of the providers was down and like it was like fire was let loose. A lot of things were sort of like started going wrong, like support was like buzzing, operations were like disorganized. One of our key mottos is Occam Stressor. So we look at Occam Stressor at everything we do. So at that point in time, a lot of things were going on. I think that's when it resonated to us that we need stuff like, well, I say, open our products so support can have access to it, operations can have access to it. So it doesn't just boil engineering. If there's an issue, it has to be engineering to fix. Engineering has to fix it. So I think those were where the conversations of API toolkits start play.
Mm. So before API Toolkit, every time there's an issue, it it will just
Yeah,
come
engineer
straight to
has
the engineering team.
that's right.
So you guys have to investigate, debug every issue, even if it's the smallest
Yeah,
issues, if I got that
yeah.
correctly.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like debugging it, and you're not just debugging, you're trying to go through like a list of logs to see where it started, what caused it. Then say for instance a provider goes down. Definitely when the provider goes down, in most cases, you won't know when it started. So when a user complains about it or when you receive stuff like a sentry notification that something is wrong, it may not be when it started. There could be actually be silent issues happening behind the scene, so then we have to like sort of debug through the whole system, try to find out which users have been affected and which like what caused it.
Mm,
Is it on our end, which provider? Because we are using quite a couple of multiple providers. Say for instance, a feature can have like three providers powering it. It's not just one provider where you know is this provider if anything goes wrong. So you have to know which of the
mhm,
providers is the issue coming from, which takes time, and
mm,
then which was the issue, and then you have to get across to them and start trying to fix it, which is sort of like can take up to
mm.
2 3 hours to fix those things.
Okay. So so now how have things changed? Like if an issue happens, what do you do now? Now that you already started to use API Toolkit in your stuff.
So I think the funny thing is like engineering, we do nothing, we don't do anything else. So I think one of the key things
Really?
to take back, yeah, that's the funny thing. I think one of the key things to take back is we've been able to sort of like build our system where, because before now running a startup, we have to be turning off fire like extinguishing fire as if something happens. So at some point, like we can spend a week trying to fix several bugs. So most times things can be coming up each day, each point in time, something new comes up. So you can see you can take a whole week trying to fix these things, and you haven't really built anything new. So I think one of the key things, one of the discussions we had was how can we streamline this? So for instance, if a bug occurs, in most cases our support can handle it. In most cases, operations can handle it. We don't need to involve the engineering team. So it's sort of like we've built out sort of like on API Toolkit. So this is the funny thing. When we start using API Toolkit, we're just logging, trying to see what went wrong. but it was pivoted to more advanced usages. Yeah, for instance, an example of it is our operations. If something happens, they can, from it, your API toolkit, you have a context they can use to know which users are facing these issues. So they can be able to get across to support to contact those users. We have streamlined it where we know the users having that issue and we notify them automatically that we are working on this. So let's say, for instance, we're trying to process a payment, something goes wrong. You don't need to come back to our support to report to them. We know the issue, we know once went wrong, and we're actually getting across to you that this went wrong, we're already working on it. And once it's fixed, we get
Oh,
across to you, let you know. So I think it was actually we just built it out, but then I think due to operations, customer support, they are closer to the product. They now see these things, they understand these things way better than us. For instance, in most cases, I don't know the provider we are using. They've been able to stuff like streamline everything, turn off what they want. Through the API toolkit, they can see what's actually working. For instance, if a customer tries to create card, one of our providers is done. They can automatically switch to another provider and get across, start fixing with that current provider. So in most cases, we don't know engineering is kind of like we don't actually like no, actually, I won't say no, but then we are not involved in all the processes of trying to fix issues, trying to get things that are which has freed us a lot of time to actually innovate and build our product on the long run.
this is amazing. And for
Yeah,
me, it's amazing because when I built API Toolkit to solve engineering problems. So when I have
yeah,
this kind of conversations, and you're telling me, hey, like, even though we set up this tool for us engineers, now we're not even the main users. Now the support
yes.
team, the operations team, they are the real users.
Yeah, I think because that's actually interesting. Because I think one of the key things also the filtering on API tokens, so they can filter based, let's say for instance a UID, they can see all the logs by that user. So they already know that this is assigned to this, that this one. So in most cases, they don't need to involve us on any of the processes. They already know what went wrong. Normally, we have amplitude where we can use to see the pages the user go through, but then it doesn't sort of like let you know the user sent this and the backend return this. And when before the backend return this, which processes, where did it fail, where did something go wrong, and then we had which of the provider is it a provider issue, is it more of like a client an entry issue from the customer aspect. So being able to stuff like break these different aspects down for them helps us to like just work on other things without having to get involved on the day-to-day issues, day-to-day fixes that needs to be done.
Yeah. Another bit of how you use the product that I'm amazed about is that
Okay.
when something goes wrong, you don't need to notify all your customers. So you're able to
Yeah.
just notify the
So
customers that are
that
affected.
has such a we actually noticed about it. So for instance, when I handed over the like integration to operations, it was also going to be seen logs. But then over time, due to how they notice the system works, they've been able to innovate that approach for themselves. Where if they have issues, they go through the endpoints that was having the issue. Then they can query, let's say, this issue started 2 hours, 4 hours ago. They can get all users having that issue, get their UID, and send an email or push notification to them letting them know about it. So it was quite interesting when we saw the whole process, how it was being streamlined, how it was being automated. So they don't need to send sort of like a general notification to all the users. Because I think when we started looking at it, it actually made a lot of sense. Because most users they don't even know that your app is down, they are not using it. So you're letting them know that the app is down, it doesn't change anything. So it's one of those users having those issues. That's where like you
Yeah.
focus on them, letting them know this is down, we know it's down, this has been fixed, you can try it now. So it kind of like
I,
helps us to streamline all these aspects of the product.
and it also helps you manage trust, right? So
Trust,
because you
exactly.
don't have to tell unaffected users that something went wrong, you don't affect the
Yeah,
trust of those users.
exactly. Because an issue could just be faced by one or two persons. So those two persons are only the ones who know that this is wrong. Because I think one of the things of the way we build the product, like lifestyle, like I said earlier, the lifestyle of you could be different from the lifestyle for the user. What you use on the product, for instance, some of the features of the product, some of the users haven't used it, but then some of users, that's the only feature they use. So we've been able to stuff like
Hmm.
break this down, segment the users. We are what you're interested in. If it's not working, we let you know. What you're not interested in, whether it's working or not, you don't need to know about it.
It's on a needs by needs basis. I really love that, and I feel like like even I am not doing this. Like I have API tool, and I'm not doing this with my customers. So now I'm learning,
Yeah.
and I realize it's something I can learn from. And when issues happen, you can be a bit more intelligent in who you're notifying about what goes wrong, or what went wrong, etc. So thanks a lot for sharing. But what about within the engineering teams now? Uh, I want to understand what features or how you guys within the backend team specifically are using, or the engineering team are using the platform. So yeah, what do you use? Do you guys use this error tracking, for example? What is your workflow like?
I think for the major aspect, apart from the logins in logs and endpoints, so we sort of like it's more of like differs based on the aspects of the products each backend engineer is working on. For instance, most of the a couple of the engineers are more focused on API Toolkit notifies that the set point has changed. What went wrong? What did the backend returns that it has been returning before? So this sort of like start looking at it that this because our product is more of like mobile app focused. So the mobile app like reads the API and gets response and requests. So I think we sort of like it's more of like looking at how this endpoint changed. Maybe this version of the API, this version of the product that was pushed changed an aspect of the product. In any way, does this sort of like so a couple of tests will be run. Does this break anything on the current version and let's say the available versions of the mobile application. So I think it's more of like I think the two things we use mostly because operations have what they focus on is mostly the login and then the reporting. I think these are the two aspects of API Toolkit that we use heavily. I think recently.
So you make use of the login especially. Do you and your mobile team depends
Yeah.
uh, heavily on knowing whether something changed in an endpoint? I realized one use case because we have a customer that has, just like you have your use cases that are very unique. We've been speaking with some customers, and they usually customers that have some kind of public documentation, public swagger, hosted wherever, and they realize that a lot of the times the back end teams would make changes, but not tell the documentation teams that they've made these changes.
Yeah.
So these documentation teams want a way to always know that, okay, there's something has changed. Maybe let's update the public documentation. Do you guys have similar use cases, or do you, like, especially since you have this B2B use case that you are going after, do you have this public documentation that you're trying to keep
I
in
think
sync?
this is actually like yeah, I think it's actually quite an interesting subject to look at. So for us right now, it's more of us looking at so our mobile team, they have access to API to key, they have access to like all the login tools we have. So I think one of the key things is let's say for instance if a mobile guy or a mobile developer we have get a notification that these endpoints have changed. I think due to we've been using it a lot, it sort of like creates this sense of like what changed? Did it break anything on the mobile app? So it's more of I think one of the interesting thing was the notification. Once an endpoint, the response changes, they have to check did it break anything? Like did the test we run break? Did the live version of the application did this affect it? So I think it has like there are aspects of API toolkit of looking at the response structures of the endpoints and notifying if something the structure has changed or a data type has changed. So I think that aspect of the product has helped us to we like to be proactive to changes. We most cases the backend is just pushed a new build or pushed a new version, and then they assume that it won't break anything on the API. Like the mobile app, we already have access to, but then maybe at some point, one aspect of the product which like nobody knows about or nobody has worked on, something goes wrong there.
Hmm.
So I think being able to sort of like create this link between like what the backend is doing versus what the mobile app is using. For us right now, this is sort of like our major use case. But then I think it will be interesting when we launch our Platnova business, having this public API
Mhm.
and being able to sort of like automate this process. We have, for instance, let's say an API changes. We don't need to start going to update the document, but then having access to like real-time changes on our documentation, I think that will fasten a lot of process, streamline quite a lot of things for us.
Interesting. Maybe one more use case I want to see if you use. You mentioned you used something like Sentry in the past.
Yeah, that's right.
You still use Sentry right now?
Not really heavily, right? And it's still there, but then we hardly use it to check what goes wrong. Like because I think one of the interesting things API Toolkit has done for us behind the scene, which is not really actually what we signed up for it, was being able to like because I think the thing about mobile application APIs like the system is if something goes wrong, it's 90% of the cases is from the backend. The backend starts sending what I
Always
think
blaming the backend.
yeah, no, that's the interesting thing because, like, for instance, mobile app have used, let's say, the data structure to build the data type, the issue, everything. They have some like conditions to check if something changes, but then I think they've trusted the backend. This is the way it should be. So if the backend goes and sends something else, in most cases, it like starts seeing a blank page, like what went wrong. So I think being able to have that aspect of the product taken care of where something changed before you even look at the mobile app, like, oh, this will break things. Like API Toolkit notified me that this infrastructure changed. We need to check if it actually breaks something. The user doesn't need to come and tell us like this page is not working. Then we'll start looking at which version did we push that breaks something, which one did we push that changed something that the mobile
Mhm.
app or the client was expecting. So I think these are some of the interesting conversations we've been able to have around the API Toolkit usage.
I see. Did you have you integrated this error tracking, API Toolkit error tracking in your backend systems so far?
No, we haven't added that yet right now, but I
Oh,
think we
okay.
can actually take a look at that, see how that comes into play into our current workflow.
Yeah, okay. I think I would really look forward to some feedback from you because, especially since you already make use of something like Sentry. So maybe
Okay.
while your ops team can see, this is the request a customer made, these are the outgoing integrations that we called. Maybe it's valuable for them to also know, okay, this is the backend errors that happen, or these are the exceptions that were thrown.
Oh, okay. So it sort of like goes through our logs and any logs that's been logged, it tracks those on API Toolkit.
No, not the logs, just the errors. So anytime there's an error, if,
Okay.
for example, maybe there was a database error or, the regular errors, not just what is in the request and response body.
Okay. So does this sort of goes so okay. So I wanted to know like the error tracking now, is it more of focused towards let's say the API request, or is it more of like for instance, let's say we have background jobs running. Does it also track errors that happen within those background jobs?
You would be able to track errors in those background jobs. But even within a request handler,
Okay.
sometimes let's say you return a 503 because something went wrong. Sometimes you want to
Okay.
know exactly what went wrong. Was it
Yeah.
maybe it was something in your system, maybe it's some SDK you called that had some errors, something didn't go well. So being able to add that extra error information to the request. So when you see the request and the response, you can also see the like code level errors that happened while processing that request.
Oh, and then this comes also with the stack trace where you'll be able to trace the error.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. That's interesting.
So maybe
That's
this is a use
interesting.
case, but I guess in our next conversation, you would likely have used this more and, and can share some brutal
Yeah,
feedback. Okay, so
definitely.
just to move on, I guess the next things I want to hear from you is feedback. Like, what areas of feedback would you have for us? What do you think? What use cases do you have that you think, would make your life so much easier or better?
Okay, I think because like we try to any product we use, try to play around with it, see how it can like what can be done, how it can like we can customize it to our needs. So I think one of the key things we started looking at, so API is quite interesting. So we one of the I think one of our operations actually asked that question, that say for instance a customer makes a request. So most some of our requests are like it goes, but then it's on a background job. You can retry it from there, like retry the jobs if something goes wrong. Then
Mm-hmm.
some of them are more of like requests that comes through. But then say we want to retry the request instead of the customer having to retry it. We want to sort of like we let's say simulate that request to happen again for us to see actually what happens. So we have like a couple of I think two endpoints that has that use case where we want to like retry that request. So a customer makes sort of like a request, it goes through, but then somewhere be like on the line something went wrong. But then we tell the customer that something went wrong, or then somewhere on the line something goes wrong, but the customer doesn't know because like the process is we tell them like is in process, but then behind the scene we are running like the jobs, the processes and whatnot. So I think one of our operations asked. So instead of them having to go to let's say our queue system to try something that goes wrong, can would they be able to more of like simulate that request, try that request like the customer. So we started looking at it, which has implications. It has a lot of challenges. But I think API Toolkit, looking at like such conversations on API Toolkit where you can be able to sort of like build on it. So API Toolkit has provided the solution. So I think the conversation was like, is there a way for us to extend API Toolkit? Is it more of like I think it goes around like for instance on Shopify, you can build Shopify apps, you can build those extensions on Shopify based on your use
Mm-hmm.
cases, based on your preferences. So I think that's one of the feedbacks on being able to sort of like customize API. Definitely there's a conversation around because it's on cloud. It's not like sort of like an on-premise version where you make changes, it has to come to you guys. So I think there were like conversations around that. Is there a way for us to modify some things on API toolkit? For instance, let's say operations, they want access there are some things they need access to, while there are other things, modules or features they don't need access to. So being able to just give them that when they log on onto API, they only see that. They don't need to start seeing other things which they don't really need access to. So sort of like streamlining the onboarding process for them. They don't have a lot of things to know,
Mm-hmm.
like this is the way this works, but just focusing on what they actually need. I think that was one of the conversations, one of like an
Oh.
ACL control, access control on API, where customer support only has access to the logs, engineering has access to this and this. So being able to sort of like break down these roles, permissions across on API. I think that's one of the other conversations. I think the other which we spoke about I think a couple of days ago about payment, the billing system or something, being able to sort of like try that payment or like the authenticated card we no longer using to connect on our card, those
Mm-hmm.
process. I think these are some of the these are the three things that we still have like the conversations around. How can we do this? With what how to proceed with this? How do we need to let's say for instance, I think one of the key things, one of the key questions we've gotten lately is based on the roles and permissions. Where operations want to give a certain user a certain team member access to a certain aspect of the product for them to just use that and have access to it. They don't need access to other things. So in most cases, we've seen that we have to train them on this is this, you don't need it. This is this, you don't need it. This is what you need to focus on. But I think being able to sort of like
Yes.
removing on what they don't need, showing them only what they need, we sort of like
What they need.
streamline a lot of.
So what, first of all, thanks. I think these three bits of feedback are very valuable.
Okay.
The first one being a means of extending API toolkit to be able to add
Yeah.
some custom use cases. The second being the I don't know the I guess the access control of some form where
Okay.
you can give different teams the access to just the specific bits that they need. And then my peanut brain is making me forget the third one. Oh yeah, the billing. Yes, exactly. So the billing, we're switching payment providers. We're a small team and we've been focusing on the the cause of the product. I know
Okay.
billing is supposed to be the number one core, but but we've been focused on a lot of those other use cases. But I think this is very good feedback that we should devote some engineering time to that already. The second bit, maybe I start with the bit about access control. That is definitely, thanks for that feedback, and that is going to come
Okay.
sooner than later. Now, for the big feedback about extending the platform, I think we would have some more conversations because it depends on what kind of extensions, right? Some kinds of extensions could be maybe things that we can add into the UI. You can, configure some things, expose some use cases,
Okay.
while some sorts of some other ways of extending the app could be maybe having some APIs that you can use to access every bit of the system and automate some things on your end. So
Okay.
these we would explore. But I wonder though, what use cases do these customer support teams have right now, other than just copying the request to retry it? Because that's the example you gave, that they want to retry a request that the customer already did. That seems like a valid feature that we should implement anyway. Right now you can copy a request. I don't know if you've seen that in the
So
UI,
I think,
but maybe we can.
yeah,
Hmm?
copy.
Yeah, maybe we can add other forms of copying. For example, copy it into Postman or copy it into Core or something like that. Or maybe open an editor,
Okay.
like click on a request and open an editor where you can edit the request and then execute the request. So
Okay, that could
yeah.
work. Yeah, because I think we have actually had a situation like this where we have a customer who was trying to like sort of like process a payment, but then they enter sort of like a lower value. But then during
Hmm.
the customer support conversation, so they were like, is there a way for us sort of like process the payment and update the value for them behind the scene? I think that's where this conversation started off. Them being able to retry that request,
Hmm.
edit, let's say for instance, a value, and then run the process. Because I think that issue was like the customer entered some wrong details, bank details. But then during the call with the customer, we sort of like saw that it was a mistake from them. But then that payment is already processing. Customer support had to
Yes.
cancel it for the user to retry. So, but then I think one of the things the customer was like, "Can't you just update this for me and process the payments?" So hence they were like, "Is there a way for them to edit that request, update the details, and retry it for the payment to go through?" I
Hmm.
think it was like these conversations around them having more, let's say, autonomy on being able to modify it. Because I think right now, actually, I think our custom operations now understand the products more than some of the engineering team members because they now see the customers using the product, they see the way the system works. So they have these two, like, let's say, this experience, like the customer's perspective, this customer, this is how they use this aspect of the product, this customer, this is how they use this aspect of the product. So understanding these
Mm,
different scenarios, situations for the customers helps them now. They already understand, okay, this customer uses this product like this. Let's use this provider for them. This customer uses
mhm,
this is more of their major let's say use case. Let's use this provider for them. So them being able to sort of like handle those edge cases and different scenarios, I think it has helped our product evolve to like I think some of the core features we never thought of is a sort of like been added or been built based on these feedbacks.
yes, yeah, and that's the exact same thing that we are going to be doing now because we'll be learning from your feedback, just like your own customer support teams are doing. But so I really appreciate this feedback, and I would reach out to you again, and so we can collaborate and work towards solving that problem. So maybe just to move
Awesome.
on, so I
That
don't
makes
take
sense.
all of your day. One last question. So have you used similar products to API Toolkit before? And how would you compare them? And would you recommend API Toolkit if you had to, if someone asked you, huh?
I think I wouldn't really say similar, but I think the Google Cloud Log Explorer, GCP Log Explorer, is more of like we try using that to see the logs, the requests, and everything. But I think it doesn't really compare. But I think it's a similar we've tried using that to handle what API Toolkit do for us now. So I think, but then API Toolkit sort of like takes it a step further, where we see the request, the response, the whole process,
Mm,
the whole payload that comes with each request. I think it has helped us in so many ways, quite a lot of ways. We try using Datadog, but Datadog is expensive. It was quite expensive for us
mm.
then. Like we
I-
couldn't, like,
I've,
it was very expensive.
I've,
We couldn't continue
I've,
with it.
yeah. In a previous place of employment, we had like a million euro bills from Datadog, so I understand what you mean.
Yeah, so I think we try using a couple of like services, a couple of products for like handling our login, our data monitoring and whatnot. But I think API Toolkit like definitely has solved that in a unique way for us. Being able to like get that, because I think it's actually like based on what we wanted to build. So having that, like, this is actually what we are thinking of, what we've visioned, what we tried designing to build. But then we had reservations of how to manage the data, the maybe bit of AI aspect that comes in being able to like build models around the responses that we get. But I think seeing API Toolkit doing that for us has really helped us on being able to scale on it, being able to have these several aspects of our products being like sort of like being developed on the long run. So I think definitely I will recommend it to someone. I will sort of like let them know that this is actually what this can do for you. This is actually like before you run into this issue, before you can actually start using it. I think definitely I think startups actually need to, well, I say it's one of the two bets you need to add in, being able to see your logs. Because, for instance, provisioning several services, configuring so many things, for running a good logging system, a sort of like a robust logging system, is quite expensive. But I think having sort of like a service you just connect to and it does everything for you, and I think definitely that should be quite one of the key things about using API Toolkit.
I really appreciate that. So just one final word.
Okay.
Um, what would you say to any companies or startups that are looking at APIs but are skeptical? They're like, why the hell should we use this?
I think one of the things I would say is skeptical based on like what are you skeptical about, what are you scared of. I think one of the key things is I think at some point I was also skeptical about that. For instance, if we add API toolkits, will it slow our request? Will it slow sort of like if a customer trying to call an endpoint, will it slow things down? But I think adding it and seeing that API toolkit doesn't block anything, it's stuff like run on its own thread and doesn't literally affect your response time, doesn't affect the requests, how long they take to get back. So I think it's one of the key things. So I would say you should just give it a trial. If you don't want to sort of like get into production immediately, you can test it on your staging environment, get it to production to see actually how it works. Because I would say, I won't only say you don't really lose anything. You will actually wouldn't lose anything on using API because it runs behind the scene. You can add it to a product. You won't even see any difference on how the products operates is on the later on. Once you gather this data, you start seeing like this visibility on your product. You start seeing like, oh, users actually make. So, for instance, I think one of the key things that happened recently was, oh, we're like, oh, this endpoint. For instance, when we release a new feature, we want to see like, has any new user called these endpoints? Is endpoint actually being used? When was the last time it was used? Can we modify it? Can we make changes to it? Is it actually like a core aspect? Then we can say, okay, this endpoint was used actually 6 months ago or 4 months ago. That means users don't really access this aspect of the product. So we can make changes to it. We can retrace on it. We can sort of like scale it, or this endpoint is being used a lot. We need to scale this service or this aspect of the product. So I think having this visibility, having these metrics helps not just the engineering but the business in making decisions.
So I really
So
appreciate these words. And I really very much appreciate your time today and
mhm.
all the feedback. You're one of our earliest customers, and you've been with us through through many levels of growth. So thank you again, and thanks for agreeing to have this chat and this conversation today. So thanks, man. Let me end
Yes,
this.
definitely.